The storm had rolled in without warning. From the 34th floor of the glass tower, lightning split the horizon, its reflection flashing across the floor-to-ceiling windows of my office. I stood alone, tie loosened, jacket draped over the back of a chair, the glow of monitors washing me in cold light. Rows of numbers flickered across the screens, security breaches, simulations, streams of encrypted data flowing like a language only I could read. To anyone else it was noise. To me it was music. The silence was broken by the sharp buzz of my phone. One word on the screen froze me. Home. Not a place I had called in 2 years, not since the last family gathering that burned like a scar. My brother's voice filled the voicemail before I could stop it. Family meeting. Saturday. It's about Mom. And Dad. You need to show up this time. The words landed heavier than the thunder rolling outside. For a moment I could only stare at the skyline, the rain streaking down glass like a film reel of memories I didn't ask to replay. Colton's smug toast, Maris's staged sympathy, the way they'd laughed about my computer games, as though I were still a child asking for allowance. My reflection in the glass looked nothing like the image they had burned into their minds. To them, I was still the little sister who never quite measured up. But the person staring back at me wore the armor of battles won in silence. Years of risk, sacrifice, and sleepless nights that had built an empire no one at home even knew existed. Another buzz. This time it wasn't family. Noelle appeared in the doorway, an umbrella dripping rainwater onto the polished floor. Perfectly pressed blouse, eyes sharp as ever, she carried a folder thick with papers. Your shares vested this morning. 11.2 million. She placed it on my desk like it was nothing. Then softer. Are you going to tell them? Tell them. The thought made me laugh, bitter and quiet. Tell them I had built something they could never dismiss with a joke? Tell them that while they were busy performing for neighbors and colleagues, I was designing firewalls strong enough to guard governments? Tell them the little sister they pitted now held more power than any of them could dream? Lightning flashed again, illuminating the office. For a second I saw myself as they would. Worn hoodie, tired eyes, jeans that hadn't seen a washing machine in days. To them I'd look unchanged. And maybe that was exactly how I wanted it. Because what they never understood was that silence is the sharpest blade. I closed the folder without looking at it. Book me a flight, I told Noelle, voice calm but final. Her eyebrow arched. Commercial. Commercial, I confirmed. A pause. Then, almost as an afterthought, but tell Briggs to keep the helicopter warm. The storm outside cracked again, thunder shaking the glass. Inside, a different kind of storm was already building. The plane touched down just after dusk, its wheels hissing against the wet tarmac of the small regional airport. The storm had followed me across the coast, trailing clouds like shadows that refused to let go. By the time I stepped out into the night air, the rain had softened to a mist, a veil that blurred the familiar outlines of Willow Harbor. I hadn't been back in 2 years, yet everything felt unchanged. The leaning billboard that welcomed travelers with chipped paint, the scent of pine carried in on the wind, the dark stretch of highway leading into town. Familiar and suffocating. The rideshare driver barely looked at me as I slid into the back seat, my hoodie damp against cracked leather. He glanced at the faded Stanford logo on my chest, then back at the road. People always assumed they knew my story. Small town girl, big city dreams came back empty-handed. The narrative wrote itself and I'd let it. As the car wound through the quiet streets, fragments of memory pressed against me. The echo of laughter in the country club dining room, Maris sliding a glossy business card across the table, Colton declaring that I should stop playing with toys and find a real job. The humiliation had sat in my throat like broken glass. I remembered promising myself I'd never give them the satisfaction of seeing me again. And yet here I was pulled back by 2 words in a voicemail, Mom. Dad. The house appeared around the bend, its colonial frame outlined in the soft yellow of porch lights. A Range Rover gleamed in the driveway, polished to perfection even under streaks of rain. Behind it, a cherry red sports car. Colton and Maris hadn't changed. Not really. I lingered on the curb before walking up. The old maple tree still towered beside the house, branches spread like arms protecting what was beneath. My father had planted it the week I was born. Now its bark was cracked and brittle just like him. The front door opened before I could knock. Colton filled the doorway. Crisp shirt tucked into pressed khakis, voice booming with forced cheer. Well, look who finally showed up. His hug was firm, practiced, more performance than welcome. Inside, the house smelled of lemon chicken. The same recipe my mother had made every Sunday of my childhood. The aroma pulled at something fragile in me, but the warmth evaporated the moment Maris appeared. Perfect hair, flawless makeup, the kind of polish that required effort every second of the day. You look comfortable, she said, eyes flicking to my hoodie. A pause, then a smile edged with pity. Very startup casual. Before I could respond, she pressed something into my hand. A gift card. For interview clothes, she explained. Her voice lowered like she was offering charity to a stranger. Elliot says there's a clerical position opening at his firm. Benefits and everything. The card burned against my palm. I managed a tight smile. Thanks. But inside I felt the storm again, swirling and tightening. They still saw me as the girl who hadn't made it. And maybe that was exactly what I needed them to see. Dinner was an echo of every gathering that had come before. Polite chatter layered with subtle cuts that drew blood only I could feel. Colton dominated the conversation, his voice smooth and practiced as he detailed his firm's latest renewable energy deal, casually dropping numbers meant to impress. Maris chimed in with stories from charity committees and golf tournaments, laughing a fraction too loudly at Elliot's muttered jokes. I sat at the far end of the table, the worn Stanford hoodie like armor in a room filled with designer threads. Each word they spoke reinforced the script they'd written for me years ago. The underachiever, the afterthought, the sister who couldn't keep up. So, Paisley, Colton said finally, spearing a piece of chicken with theatrical flair. How's that little tech project of yours? Still tinkering. The word tinkering landed like a hammer. It's called cybersecurity, I replied evenly. Maris leaned toward our mother, lowering her voice but not enough. She needs stability, Mom. That's why I gave her the gift card. Elliot says first impressions matter in interviews. The room hummed with agreement. Even my parents, their faces softened by fatigue, nodded along. They didn't know. They had never known. The conversation shifted to care facilities. Colton clicked through slides on his laptop, projecting glossy brochures onto the living room TV, as if it were a corporate presentation. Smiling seniors, manicured gardens, promises of comprehensive care. We've narrowed it down to 3 options, he announced. Lakeside Pines is the most exclusive. Mom and Dad loved the dining options. My fork froze halfway to my lips. They'd already taken them on tours? I glanced at Mom. She smiled faintly, eyes darting between Colton and the screen like she was waiting for permission to speak. Dad stared at the carpet, tapping his glass with distracted rhythm. When were you planning to tell me? I asked, my voice sharper than intended. Colton chuckled, waving it off. You've been busy, Pius. We didn't want to bother you with details. Besides, we've worked out the finances. He clicked to a chart. Maris and Elliot cover 36%. I'll take 52. That leaves about 12% for you, which is, let's see, under $2,000 a month. Manageable, right? The table erupted with sympathetic murmurs, as though they were granting me a favor. Maris even touched my hand lightly, her smile rehearsed. If it's too much, we can reduce your share. Maybe 600. You can help in other ways, visiting more often. The humiliation was surgical. They had already carved out roles, assigned percentages, and relegated me to the weakest link. The girl who couldn't pay her share. Something inside me shifted. The humiliation didn't sting this time, it calcified. I caught my reflection in the window, their overlooked sister, wearing a hoodie and hiding secrets worth millions. And in that reflection, a thought crystallized with the force of inevitability. Enough. My phone buzzed under the table. A single message from Noelle. Whenever you're ready. I looked at Colton, at Maris, at the neat stack of brochures on the table. For the first time all night I felt calm. The night pressed heavy against the windows, rain streaking the glass like veins of silver. After dessert, Mom and Dad retreated upstairs, their movements slow, weighted by years that none of us wanted to name. I lingered in the kitchen, rinsing plates under the faucet just to avoid the inevitable conversation. Colton leaned against the counter, beer in hand, his tie loosened but his posture still military straight. He sighed, a sound I wasn't used to hearing from him. "Jackson got the promotion," he muttered, almost to himself. 6 months of 80-hour weeks, and they gave it to him. 5th time I've been passed over. For a moment I didn't recognize him. The unshakable brother, always polished, always certain, letting his armor crack. "Seems like you're doing fine," I said, nodding at the gleaming Range Rover outside the window. He laughed, bitter. "Appearances. That's what matters in my world." The admission hung between us, fragile and sharp. Then footsteps sounded in the hall. Maris's voice, low and urgent. I stilled. "What if she can't afford her share?" she whispered to Elliot. "We can't cover for her. Not with the Bowman account in jeopardy." Her husband murmured something I couldn't catch, but Maris pressed on. "Colton's plan has her at 12%. Even that's too much. We might have to step in until she gets back on her feet." Their voices faded as they moved away, but the words stayed coiled tight in my chest. Back on her feet. To them I was still crawling. Still unfinished. I carried the plates to the sink, setting them down harder than I meant to. Colton didn't notice or pretended not to. Later, alone in my childhood bedroom, I stared at the relics on the walls. Faded ribbons from academic decathlons, dusty science fair trophies, a cracked photo frame of me in braces holding my first coding award. This was the version of me they'd chosen to freeze in time. Ambitious but naive, a girl destined to fail. My phone buzzed again. "Noelle. Briggs has the helicopter ready. Just say when." I typed back, "Tomorrow. 11:30 a.m. The reply came instantly. "Understood." I set the phone on the nightstand and lay back, staring at the ceiling. My heartbeat slowed, steady as a drum. For years I'd thought the only way to win was to leave, to build my life far away, invisible to their judgments. But maybe the only way forward was to step right into the fire, and let them see what they'd refused to all along. The storm outside had softened into silence, but inside me, something had hardened into certainty. Tomorrow the roles would reverse. Tomorrow they would look at me, really look, for the first time in our lives. I closed my eyes, whispering into the dark, as though saying it aloud would make it real. The morning light made everything look too calm. As though the night before hadn't happened. As though the weight of decades wasn't about to collapse on this house. We gathered in the living room. Brochures scattered across the coffee table like playing cards in a rigged game. Colton stood at the television, clicking through a polished PowerPoint presentation, his voice crisp. "This is Lakeside Pines. Best staff-to-resident ratio. Comprehensive services. Excellent reputation." Maris nodded dutifully, her planner open on her lap. In the margin I caught a note. Move-in date 3 weeks. My stomach turned. Decisions had already been made. "And the costs?" Colton continued, clicking to a neat pie chart. "I'll cover 52%. Maris and Elliot 36. That leaves 12 for Paisley. Manageable, though we've factored in a reduced share if necessary." He smiled like he'd done me a favor. Maris reached for my hand again, her voice syrupy. $600 a month, Paisley. And maybe you can help by visiting more. Time matters more than money for you. Their pity was suffocating. I looked at my parents. My father's hands twitched against his knees, his gaze lowered, unfocused. My mother sat stiffly, lips pressed together as if she'd forgotten how to speak without permission. The silence around them was louder than Colton's entire presentation. I leaned forward. "What do you want?" The room stilled. Colton blinked. "Excuse me." I turned to my parents, keeping my voice steady. "Mom. Dad. What do you want? Where do you want to live? How do you want your care handled?" My mother's eyes flicked to Colton, searching, trapped. "They want the best," he began. "I'd like to hear it from them," I cut in. Dad's voice cracked the air like fragile glass. "We don't want to leave Willow Harbor." The words hung there, impossible to ignore. Colton recovered quickly, dismissive. There's nothing suitable here. These facilities are their only option. And then it began, faint at first like a storm far off. A low hum, rhythmic, insistent. Thump, thump, thump. The walls seemed to vibrate. The maple tree outside shivered as the sound grew louder, whipping leaves into a frenzy. Maris leapt to the window, curtains yanked wide. Her gasp carried across the room. A helicopter? All eyes turned to the lawn. The sleek black machine descended, blades tearing the morning air, scattering gravel in spirals. The Aurelius logo gleamed on its side. I rose, smoothing the front of my faded hoodie. No emergency, I said quietly. That's my ride. The room fractured. Disbelief on Maris's face, anger flashing in Colton's, confusion blooming in my parents' tired eyes. The helicopter settled, blades slowing. The door opened and Briggs stepped out in his pressed suit, posture straight as a blade. He looked toward the house, waiting. I walked to the door, then paused, hand on the knob. My voice carried steady, calm but final. This conversation isn't over. But it won't be finished here. And with that I opened the door. Wind roared in, tugging at papers, rattling the glass. Colton shouted something, Maris called my name, but I didn't look back. The blades slowed to silence. When the doors of Haven Ridge opened, the air changed. Not just the scent of polished wood and garden roses drifting in through tall windows, but something subtler. The weight of possibility pressing against years of resignation. Mom's hand gripped mine as we walked through the foyer, her eyes darting from the high ceilings to the sweeping staircase. Dad followed slowly, his gaze catching on every detail, the bookcases, the framed artwork, the polished floors. For once he wasn't lost. He was present. This place, he murmured, voice trembling. It feels alive. Dr. Wiseman appeared with her warm, deliberate smile, introducing staff who spoke directly to my parents, not around them. The physical therapist demonstrated equipment designed with dignity in mind. The chef described meals tailored to comfort and health. In each room my parents' faces shifted, fear giving way to recognition, resignation softening into hope. Behind us, Colton and Maris trailed like ghosts, their footsteps hesitant, their silence loud. This wasn't the world they had prepared to control. It was one built outside of their permission. When the tour ended, I guided everyone into the library. No brochures, no PowerPoint slides, just a table for chairs and the truth. I met my parents' eyes first. This estate isn't about showing off. It isn't about me winning or proving anything. It's about you. Your care. Your comfort. Your dignity. That's all I've ever wanted to give you. Dad's hand trembled as he reached for the documents on the table. You built this. I nodded. With a team. With sacrifice. With every ounce of myself they once told me wasn't enough. Silence thickened, then broke. Colton's voice, rougher than I'd ever heard it. I needed you to fail. To believe I chose the right path. But watching you, I don't know if I ever believed in mine. Maris swallowed hard, her posture collapsing. And I've spent years building walls made of parties and perfect photos. You tore them down in an afternoon. And maybe that's what I needed. Mom wiped at her eyes. We were wrong, Paisley. We thought success was the car in the driveway, the job title, the charity gala. We didn't see you for who you were. And we should have. Her words hit harder than any dismissal ever had. After years of silence, recognition burned like a bomb and a wound all at once. I breathed in, steadying. This estate, this foundation, it's not mine alone. It carries all our names. If we choose to let it. The words settled like both an invitation and a challenge. For a long time no one spoke. Then Dad, clear-eyed and unshaken, whispered. Different strengths. One family. The four of us sat there, not as roles we had worn too long, the responsible son, the polished daughter, the overlooked sister, but as people stripped bare, fragile and human. Outside, the garden shimmered in late sunlight, the maple leaves bending in the breeze. That tree had witnessed my whole life, the years I was unseen, the night I left, and now this return. For the first time it didn't feel like I was standing beneath its shadow.